And I'm glad the introduction, Paul. It's not a centric Dublin talk, but I will say in terms of Limerick development and what we do in Limerick, we are very conscious that if Dublin doesn't do well, the outskirts and so on will not do well as well. So what we're trying to do in Limerick is actually give an alternative to developers and FDI companies in what we're building in Limerick City itself. So where are we, or what are we, and what we're about and so on. Okay. Before we do that, I just want to give us a little step back into the future in terms of what happened around 2008, 2009 in the Limerick region and so on. One of the major employment focus groups was Ardell. 2,000 staff all of a sudden overnight were pulling out. But not only did they pull out in terms of their staff itself, it also impacted in terms of the supply chain, and we reckon that's another 2,000 people went into unemployment at that stage at the same time. Shannon Airport and Foynes Port and Limerick Docklands Port declined also. There wasn't enough FDI coming into the city. And Dennis Brosnan was asked to actually come up and chair a task force. And this is one of the things we talk about in our previous meeting, talk about planning. And getting the plan right from the very start is essential to make sure that we can actually deliver on what we're trying to achieve. So Dennis, and I won't go into any introduction, but Dennis was asked to chair a group. And from that, today, there's been a remarkable turnaround in terms of what Limerick has been delivering and the opportunities that it's provided to investors and FDI companies and so on. 12,000 jobs in the last 5 years, 2,500 in the last year itself. Shannon Airport is back, up by 25%. Our port is back up at peak tonnage levels and so on. And there's been a massive change in terms of the 2007 to 2017 and 18. So what that has brought about is an alternative to investors, an alternative in terms of what we're doing in the country as a whole. And we've all seen in terms, and we've all heard today in terms of the various 2040 plans, that we're in a situation to do things a little bit differently in Limerick. And the awards are quite important. European City of the Future, fantastic award to achieve. We see ourselves up there and we see ourselves benchmarking against cities in Europe and what we can achieve as well. Best for the economy potential, top 10 European cities. These are all good things that we are actually showing that we're putting in infrastructure and a development around cities. So how does this kind of come about? Well, if you talk about the FDI companies, the first thing they want to really do is find out if they're in a situation that they come and do business in Ireland Inc. All right? They take that. Next thing they're looking for is a workforce. All right? Limerick has a fantastic, over 20,000 third level students are in the pipeline in terms of University of Limerick, LIT and Mary Immaculate. So we can actually tick that box as well. Then we go into a situation that we can provide very affordable office accommodation, and yields are good from developers' point of views, but also in terms of affordable office. And we've all heard recently of Stats moving to Limerick, this company to do statistic analysis in sport and so on. They're expanding. I spoke to their chief executive last week, and as of yesterday they had another 16 employees, and they hope to put that up to 100 by the year end. So again, workforce, and also being able to bring that workforce to Limerick that gives them a possibility to buy into markets or buy their own homes, but also have the disposable income as well. Where it all began. So Limerick 2030 DAC, and I'll explain what the DAC part is in a few minutes, really came from this blueprint that was originally designed back in 2013. So it was an economic and spatial plan for Limerick, and it zoned key strategic sites for the development of Limerick, along with tourism, along with infrastructure requirements and so on and so on. And this was the blueprint. If anyone says about the plan, this was the blueprint that designated various parts of Limerick to its overall future moving forward. And then this became part of the county development plan in 2015. Another thing really happened around this time is that Limerick City and County Council merged, all right? And I wouldn't underestimate the actual benefits of that, all right? We were in a situation, we had this donutting effect. Sometimes you see it in modern cities where it's easier to move out and you get that sprawl in an actual modern city. But what was happening with the city and county council, they were competing for any business that was happening. And rates were cheaper on the outskirts, and therefore people were moving into the shopping centres and so on and so on. So the inner core of the city actually changed. Now with the focus of a city and the council together, we have a collective vision of what we want to achieve. And that really, for many modern cities, is working from the inner core all the way out. Okay. From this plan, our company was set up, which I'm the chief executive of, and our sole objective, being a special purpose vehicle, was to go out and develop key strategic sites that will enhance economic development and anchors for that. So a board with that focus was established, chaired by one Dennis, and we went out and we got some directors that had commercial focused history and an understanding of the markets and so on. So what we have is a mixed board of both the commercial and, I could say, the public realm interest in terms of social development interest as well. By that, we have 2 directors from Limerick City and County Council, the head of finance and 1 of economic development, and we have 4 councillors. But also then we have brought in property experts to actually sit with that board as well, to give us that competitive focus that we're trying to achieve. So what are the key strategic sites? Limerick City and Limerick 2030 DAC is about developing these sites. And the sites are Troy Studios, Gardens International, Opera Site, Cleves and Mungret. These are substantial sites, and collectively we're probably looking at a capex spend of in excess of 600 million for those sites to be developed. Okay. Very quickly, and I'll go into them in a bit more detail in a few minutes. The Troy Studios is the former Dell factory. Gardens International was a development that went south in 2007 and sat there idle for about 10 years, longer actually. The Opera development is one across from Patrick Street, across from the Hunt Museum. It's just under a 4-acre site. Mungret development is 60 acres that we're looking at in terms of residential, and the Cleves site is 10 acres just north on the Shannon, right on the river. Location-wise, where are they situated? So, Troy Studios is out in Castle Troy, out on the periphery of the Dublin Road. This is the Opera site, which is all based around here. Okay. Gardens International is on Henry Street. Mungret, 60 acres just out in Mungret village itself, and this is our Cleve development here. All right. So you can see they're all basically in around the city centre itself. To orientate people a bit more, this is where the Sarsfield House, the revenue building, if people know Limerick itself, is normally situated here. We see ourselves knocking that because they're going to become one of our key tenants on the Opera site itself. Okay. So, Troy Studios. Troy Studios was the former Dell factory, as I talked about. It's 340,000 square foot of building. And again, complementing Limerick, they went out and purchased the site. And then again, what are we actually going to do with that site? So we were stuck in terms of a win-win for the actual city itself. And we're delighted to say we went out and we made it into a studio. So just outside Limerick, we have now 450 people involved in a production for Netflix. And if anyone's involved in Netflix, the new sci-fi movie is going to come out of Limerick called Night Flyers. I don't have the channel myself, but I am a Netflix follower. And in that, we have gone from a situation of a £60 million production, dropping that money right through the actual city itself. And it's been fantastic in terms of its linkages with the universities, also in terms of LIT, who is a fantastic fashion design element in the school. So a lot of the graduates that came out of LIT were actually hired by Troy Studios in terms of costume design and so on. There's fantastic examples in terms of the timber yard making the actual set itself. They ran out of wood, paint and so on. So that money has actually gone straight into the actual economy itself by literally thinking outside the box and saying, what could we do with this facility? And it's an exceptionally large facility, and we just put some small landlord works into it in terms of sound studios, and I'm glad to say that the movie scene has been very successful. This video is actually on the actual set itself, is when the Taoiseach visited, and again it just shows you what it's all about in terms of showbiz. You shouldn't, don't believe everything you see, whether it's got the political world or the actual film world. But anyway, Gardens International is the one on Henry Street I talked about earlier on. This is a building site that's been sitting in Limerick and gave out a very bad vibe. We were delighted to put in our first tower crane into Limerick City in the best part of about 10, 12 years. It's an 80,000 square foot net office lead gold facility. It takes in three elements to the building itself. It's got a new block, which is Garden Central. It's got the former GPO and the Mercantile building itself. It has a strong tradition of Limerick being a hub, and it was a bonded warehouse when Limerick was one of the first chartered cities outside London. So what we've gone in seeing what the market wanted, and as I go back to my previous few words, was they want somewhere, FDI companies want somewhere to do their work in a quality environment, and we've been able to provide this. It's on the market with Cushman and Wakefield's, and I'm delighted to say in the next number of weeks we'll be announcing a major tenant for this building that's been quite successful. Again, this was a big punt for Limerick City and County Council through the development company. We went out to build this with no tenants, but we knew that it had to happen if we were to generate the economic development for the city itself. And Gardens International is proving to be a quality product and a very modern product. The Opera site is a larger site. It's just under 4 acres. It's right across from the Hunt Museum. What we're looking in here is about 45,000 square meters of a mixture of office, retail, and we're now looking at some parts of residential into that. And I'm glad to see some of the speakers this morning talking about part-let hotels and so on, and we're now looking at that scheme. Again, it showed the vision of Limerick City and County Council buying the site from NAMA. The original scheme, this site was bought for 120 million back in the good days, or bad days if you want to, and Limerick were able to go and acquire that site for 12 million. The great news about this site is that we're in a situation that we've secured 170 million through EIB and CEB funding. So we're now in a situation we own the property, we have the funding to develop it, and also we have a key tenant in terms of this large block, 14 stories, is an agreement that we're going to move revenue from the Sarsfield House. So 1,000 staff are going to work in the actual revenue building itself, and we see about 3,000 staff being accommodated in the overall building itself. We see a mix then of putting in retail and cultural elements to make sure that we don't come a dead zone at night and so on, and we see retail in terms of cafe, bars, and anything that people need for 3,000 staff in terms of pharmacies and such to regenerate the actual heart area of Limerick City itself. Very exciting. So where we are in the process, we started off on a Part 8 process. Unfortunately, due to the planning process, we've taken that back out and we're going straight to Board Panola, and we're lodging this in August with a view to hopefully by the end of the year or early next year to have that. So by having the site, the funding, the planning, and one key tenant on the site, we will build this out. We're also going to build a library and a cultural centre into this site to bring in some of the community, and I'm glad a lot of the talks today was not just keeping, FDI companies in isolation, but actually linking them into the community and see how they can again benefit and so on. Mungret is a fantastic development, and it goes back to the old Jesuit college. I don't know if anyone here has a Jesuit education, but it was one of their fantastic boarding schools, and they, through no fault of their own, went out of business on that one. It became a 60-acre site, and the council again have acquired that. We've been asked through Limerick 2030 DAC to do 60 acres in terms of a master plan for residential. I'm glad to say we have actually had some discussions very briefly with Clúid as well and some of their people. We've also then hired a design team, project management team, and we're now in the process of stage 1 of master planning that. LEHAF have given some funding in terms of an access road throughout the site. But I'd like to say that, again, the foresight here on this site, just in front of that college, there's a fantastic public park for the people. There's 2 primary schools built, a Gaelscoil and an Educate Together school onto that site as well. And there's also plans for the third level school to go in as well. So it's great to see in reverse the infrastructure going in before the actual accommodation goes over it. And we're creating a fantastic community out there. Mungret has a very traditional GA club there, and we're very conscious that we are building 60 acres adjacent to a small village that used to be on the outskirts of Limerick, but now it's part and parcel of Limerick. Commuting wise, it will be a very little challenge because it's very close to the Dock Road and it's also close to Raheen, but it also serves the Raheen Industrial Estate for employees. And it was interesting to see some of the conversations from earlier speakers in terms of what affordable housing is available, and we'll make that very available in terms of new time buyers, social housing, people want to trade up, but we also want to care for the elderly in this site as well, and we see the college itself acting as some kind of maybe a medical centre or hub of activity that we can develop. Fair dues to the Jesuits, they actually had a swimming pool in this facility. We can have a look at that and see what could come back into it. Cleves development, this is 10 acres, again right on the riverfront. It's a fantastic opportunity to showcase what the next millennium for Limerick will bring, and we see this as an area of iconic building that will be a mix of both economic and social. Yes, it would be fantastic to come in and say, let's make this all residential, but that's not our game plan here. Our game plan here is to make sure that we will have some residential, we will have some educational, maybe we'll have something in terms of cultural, in terms of museums and so on, but we're also looking at the possibility of a conference centre going into this site. We have 2 listed elements in it, the lovely stack and the actual old mill itself. The history in this site is absolutely fantastic, and we all hear about public procurement, right? I'm glad to say when this was a powdered milk factory, it won one of the first public procurement processes for the British Army during World War I, came out of Cleves. And prior to that, it was a flax factory, and the boats used to come up and trade accordingly. So it's a great opportunity and a great showcase for what we're doing in Limerick. It would be amiss to be at a conference like this to actually what are the opportunities for suppliers and so on. So the way we roll out our projects is not ununique in terms of commercial. We're looking at a small team in terms of the company on a project by project basis. We bring in our project managers, our technical team. We see it as an integrated design team of PMs, architectural, conservation, QS. I won't go to the list, we all know what they are. But also then we're looking at various contractors to do the various parcels, either on a site-by-site basis or partial on a site, and design teams. One thing that we are very strong on is that we've normally brought in a viability assessment team with each of the packages that we develop. Some people, what are you at here, Dave, in terms of that? I'm making sure that what we build and what we design and deliver for Limerick are viable, and that's been one of the issues in terms of city centre locations and the rentals that have been there. But now with the development that we're going on and creating good quality jobs, we're creating the viability back into the centre itself. So it's very, very important to make sure that we have good quality teams, construction, design teams on our things. So there is opportunities coming down the tracks for these 3 sites. I should say that Try is up and running, as you saw. Gardens will be fully occupied close to the end of the year. So the 3 remaining sites that we're looking at in terms of work and services are in these sites itself. So very quickly in conclusion, Limerick is competing for economic growth. I think we've shown that in terms of the statistics and what we've been able to offer. We have a well-educated workforce. We're developing very high-class quality environments. The Lead Gold facility in Gardens is a classic example of that, but also the Opera is also going to be a Lead Gold campus, and we're actually doing NZEB in terms of the revenue building because that's a requirement going into 2020. The International Port and the airport is always an added advantage. Quality of a work-life balance is fantastic. This weekend, it'd be remiss of me not to talk about what's happening. We have a Riverfest. Munster are playing on Saturday. The town will be abuzz. It's just a fantastic work-life balance. Construction and design work is progressing. We're bringing in people as a result of that, and we have this can-do culture. And I think that's evolving as a result of what we're developing. I'm just going to leave you on a short video of what we're at and what we're able to achieve. So hopefully you get the sound on that. Thank you.